The hallway on the third floor of Sycamore Court smelled like old carpet and last night's someone else's dinner. It was 7:14 in the morning. Marcus Webb stood in his doorway in his hospital scrubs, the pale green ones with the bleach spot near the left pocket, and he had not slept in 19 hours. Two men stood in front of him. One held a clipboard. The other wore a company polo shirt with a small logo above the breast pocket. Neither of them looked him in the eye when they started talking. "Mr. Webb." The one with the clipboard cleared his throat. "This is an official condemnation notice for Unit 3C. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises. If you fail to comply, we will be contacting Child Protective Services regarding the welfare of your minor child." Marcus did not move. He did not blink. He stood in the doorway the way a man stands when he has spent 16 years in places where the wrong reaction gets people hurt. "Show me your license number," he said. Quiet, flat, like he was reading a weather report. The inspector shifted his weight. The clipboard dipped slightly in his hands. Behind Marcus, at the end of the hallway, a small figure stood in the shadow near the bathroom door. Lily, 8 years old, in her pajamas with the faded yellow stars, her animal notebook pressed against her chest with both hands. She was not crying. She was watching, with those serious dark eyes that had always seen more than they were supposed to. The man in the polo shirt, the one named Prawl, tried to fill the silence. "Mr. Webb, this really doesn't have to be." "I heard you the first time," Marcus said. He had not raised his voice. He would not raise his voice. "I asked for his license number and the statutory basis for this condemnation, in writing." Prawl glanced at the inspector. The inspector looked at his clipboard like it might tell him something useful. The fluorescent light above them buzzed and flickered in its usual broken rhythm, throwing uneven shadows across all three of their faces. Marcus reached into his back pocket and pulled out his phone. The screen had a crack running from the top right corner down to the center, a spiderweb of broken glass he had never gotten around to fixing. He looked at the two men standing in his hallway. Then he looked down at his phone and began to dial. What those two men did not understand, what Garrett Foss and his whole operation did not understand, was who they were standing in front of. But to understand what happened next, we need to go back. 6 weeks back. To a Tuesday morning, a letter slipped under a door, and a man who had learned a long time ago how to read a situation that was designed to look like one thing and be something else entirely. Before we get there, if this story already has your attention, subscribe right now and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Tomorrow's story is one you absolutely cannot miss. Now, let's go back to the beginning. The fun is just beginning. Tell us what city you're from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. The tension is rising. Who's watching from where? Like and subscribe to the channel. More to come. Tell us in the comments who's from which country, and give us a like and subscribe. The plot thickens. Let's check our geography. Tell us where you are now, give the video a thumbs up, and subscribe. We're just warming up. Tell us where you're watching from. Give the video a like and hit the subscribe button. The climax is near. Share where you're from, like, and be sure to subscribe. Events are unfolding rapidly. Write your city in the chat, give it a like, and subscribe so you don't get lost. The juiciest part is yet to come. Let's get started. Get to know each other. Where are you from? Like and subscribe right now. The suspense is building. Tell us where you're watching this episode from, and reward us with a like and a subscribe. The excitement is running high. Tell us what city you're from now, give us a big like, and subscribe to the channel. 6 weeks before that morning in the hallway, Marcus Webb was doing what he did every night at 11:47 p.m. lacing up his work shoes in the dark so he wouldn't wake Lily. The apartment was quiet. The curtains he'd bought at the discount store on Meridian, slightly too short for the windows, letting in a thin line of parking lot light at the bottom, moved just barely from the vent. He picked up his badge from the counter, clipped it to his shirt, and opened the refrigerator. He took out the container of pasta he'd made that afternoon and wrote a sticky note in his careful block print. He drew a small star in the corner. He had started doing that when Lily was 5, when she was afraid of waking up and finding the apartment empty. She was 8 now. He still drew the star. He pressed the note to the container and set it on the middle shelf where she would see it first. Then he drove 40 minutes to St. Augustine Medical Center through streets that were mostly empty, parked in Lot C, and went to work. The hospital at midnight smelled like floor cleaner and the particular staleness of recycled air that never quite gets warm. Marcus moved through the corridors with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned, a long time ago, how to work in the dark without disturbing anything. He pushed his cart. He checked his list. He nodded to the nurses he knew by name. Webb, a voice from the station near the elevator. Sandra, charge nurse, 53 years old, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. You eat anything tonight? I'm good. That's not what I asked. He almost smiled. I had something before I left. Uh-huh. She handed him a pack of crackers from the drawer without looking up from her chart. He took them. By 6:45 a.m., he was back in the Impala, the heat running, the passenger side window cracked 3/4 of the way down because it wouldn't go further. The drive home smelled like early morning Tennessee, damp pavement, and someone's wood smoke from somewhere he couldn't see. He climbed 3 flights of stairs, the elevator had been broken for 11 months, and unlocked the door to apartment 3C as quietly as he could. Lily was already up. She was at the kitchen table in her yellow star pajamas, her colored pencils lined up in a precise row from left to right, working in her animal notebook. The pasta container was open beside her, half finished. The sticky note was stuck to the edge of her notebook. She looked up. Quote, 12. Quote, 13. She considered this with the gravity of someone weighing evidence. Quote, 14. Quote, 15. He said. He hung his badge on the hook by the door, next to the photograph of his wife on the bookshelf, the one where she was laughing at something off camera, her head turned slightly, the afternoon light catching her face. He didn't look at it directly. He never did in the morning. He just let it be there, the way it had always been there. He went to make coffee, and that was when he heard the sound of something sliding under the front door. The letter was a single page, folded in thirds, on paper that felt heavier than it needed to. Foss Property Management, LLC. The logo was clean. The language was polite. It informed Marcus that his unit had been selected for a routine structural assessment and that he should expect a certified inspector within the next 2 weeks. It thanked him for his cooperation. Marcus read it twice, standing in the doorway in his socks. Then he set it on the counter next to his coffee mug and went to sleep, because he had just finished a 12-hour shift, and the letter was polite, and the language was routine, and there was nothing yet that his body knew to be afraid of. 10 days later, a second letter arrived. He found it when he got home at 7 a.m., same spot on the floor, same heavy paper. He picked it up and read it at the kitchen counter while the coffee brewed. This one cited 3 code violations in Unit 3C. A hairline fracture in the northeast ceiling. There was no fracture in the ceiling. A faulty window latch in the primary bedroom. Marcus had fixed that latch himself 14 months ago with a kit from the hardware store on Union Street, and it worked perfectly. A ventilation deficiency in the bathroom. The bathroom he had scrubbed top to bottom 8 days prior, the grout still faintly smelling of the cleaner he used. He set the letter down, He stood very still for a moment, the coffee maker hissing behind him, the morning light coming through the two short curtains in flat pale strips across the floor. 16 years of reading situations that were designed to look like one thing and be another. He knew what this felt like. Not panic, recognition. That afternoon, he went downstairs to check the mail and saw a man he didn't recognize standing in the lobby near the mailboxes. Mid-30s, company polo shirt, navy blue, with a small logo above the breast pocket. He was writing something on a clipboard and didn't look up when Marcus came down the stairs. 2 days later, the same man was in the lobby again. Marcus stopped at the bottom of the stairs. "Can I help you with something?" The man looked up and smiled the way people smile when they've practiced it. A half-second pause. Marcus looked at the logo on his shirt. Foss Property Management. He nodded once and went to get his mail. That evening, Miss Roberta from 4A knocked on his door. She was 68 years old and had lived in this building for 19 years and always smelled faintly of lavender hand cream. She was holding a piece of paper. Her hand was not entirely steady. Quote, 20. Quote, she held it out. Quote, 21. Quote, it was a yellow sticker, printed in black letters, unit under review. He took it from her and read it. Then he looked up at her face, the careful composure of a woman trying very hard not to show that she was frightened. Quote, 22, he asked. Quote, 23, she said. Quote, 24. He looked back down at the sticker. Quote, 25? Quote, 26, she said quietly. Marcus started with Miss Roberta's kitchen table. The next morning, over tea he didn't drink, because his hands needed something to do with the mug. She sat across from him in a housecoat the color of dark plums, both hands wrapped around her cup, and told him everything in the careful, measured way of someone who has been waiting for a chance to say it out loud. 19 years in this building. Not one violation notice. Not one complaint from management. Not one late rent payment. She said that last part quietly, the way people say things they are proud of and have never needed to announce before. Marcus said. She repeated. He went downstairs next. The Delgado apartment smelled like rice and something warm from the stove, and the sound of 3 children under 7 moved through the walls like weather. Rosa Delgado came to the door in her work uniform. She did the early shift at the hotel on Commerce, and her husband Carlos stood behind her with a dish towel over his shoulder and the particular expression of a man who has not slept properly in several days. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 30, underscore, underscore, Rosa said before Marcus could speak. She shook her head. Carlos said nothing. He just looked at Marcus with steady, exhausted eyes. Marcus said, he went to 1B last. Old Mr. Finch, 79, who always left his door open a few inches to hear the hallway. He said it kept the apartment from feeling too quiet. The door was open now. Marcus knocked on the frame. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 37, underscore, underscore. The apartment smelled like pipe tobacco and old paper, though Mr. Finch hadn't smoked in years. He was sitting in his armchair with a manila folder open on his lap, and when Marcus stepped inside, he saw that the folder was thick, stuffed with papers, receipts, printed emails, handwritten notes on yellow legal pad. 11 years, Mr. Finch said without looking up. Every maintenance request, every letter I sent them, every letter they sent me. He tapped the folder with 2 fingers. I kept all of it. Marcus looked at the stack of paper. Why? Mr. Finch finally looked up at him. His eyes were clear and unhurried. Because I grew up in a time when you kept everything. Because someday Somebody was going to need to see it. That night, Marcus sat at his kitchen table at 2 a.m. with a legal pad and a pen, the apartment completely quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. He wrote every name, every date, every violation that didn't exist. He organized it the way the Navy had taught him to organize field reports: clean columns, no emotion, just sequence and fact. Down the hall, Lily slept with her animal notebook open on the pillow beside her, a half-finished drawing of a dog visible in the low light from the hallway. Marcus kept writing. The public library on Calder Street had a community board near the entrance, between the water fountain and the rack of free newspapers, covered in flyers held up with colored pushpins. Marcus almost walked past it. He had come to use the printer, nothing else. But something made him stop. The flyer was pale yellow, half hidden behind a notice about a lost cat. Tenant Rights Clinic, free consultations, every other Thursday, 6 p.m. The name at the bottom, Diane Okafor, attorney at law. He took a photo of it with his cracked screen phone and kept walking. Thursday came. He had no one to leave Lily with, so she came with him, her backpack over one shoulder, the golden retriever patch catching the library's low light as they walked through the door. The library smelled the way it always did, paper and something faintly metallic from the air conditioning, the particular quiet of a room full of people not talking. Diane Okafor was already set up at a folding table near the periodicals section. 39 years old, natural hair pulled back, a yellow legal pad in front of her, and a pen she kept clicking open and closed without seeming to notice she was doing it. She looked up when Marcus sat down across from her. Lily took the plastic chair beside him and opened her animal notebook without a word. "What's going on?" Diane asked. Marcus laid it out. The letters, the false violations, the stickers on doors, the Delgados, Mr. Finch, Miss Roberta's 19 years without a single complaint, Prawl in the lobby twice in 1 week. He spoke for 4 minutes, clean and sequential, the way he'd learned to brief field reports. No editorializing, just sequence and fact. Diane did not write anything down. She just listened, her pen still, her eyes on his face. When he finished, she picked up the pen. "Tell me every name on every notice," she said. "How much time do you have?" She looked at him steadily. "As much as it takes." She wrote for 11 minutes without looking up. Then she set the pen down and turned the legal pad so he could see it. Names, dates, violation codes, inspector signatures, his information and hers, organized into a single column. "This isn't random," she said. "I know. This is coordinated. Someone is running these inspections through the same office, probably the same inspector, and they're doing it fast, which means they're working toward a deadline." She tapped the pad. "I'm going to file a discovery motion for every inspection record related to your building going back 5 years. If there's a pattern, the records will show it." Marcus nodded slowly. Across the table, Lily looked up from her notebook. She had been drawing the whole time, a careful rendering of what appeared to be a horse, but she had also, clearly, been listening. "Is someone trying to make us leave?" she asked. The question landed in the space between the adults, like something dropped from a height. Diane looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at his daughter. "Some people are trying," he said. "We're working on it." Lily looked at him for a moment with those serious dark eyes. Then she went back to her drawing. Diane reached for her phone and began to type. The discovery motion came back in 9 days. Diane called Marcus at 6:43 in the morning, which meant she had been at her desk before sunrise. "I need you to come in," she said. "Bring your legal pad." Her office was a single room above a tax preparation storefront on Millbrook Avenue, reached by a narrow staircase that smelled like old wood and printer ink. When Marcus arrived, Diane was standing at her desk with printed pages spread across every surface, held down at the corners with a stapler, a coffee mug, a law dictionary, and her phone. She did not look like someone who had slept. 5 years of inspection records, she said. 31 units flagged for violations at Sycamore Court in the last 24 months. Want to know how many of those units belong to long-term tenants who were there before Foss took over the property management contract? Marcus looked at the pages. All of them. All of them. She picked up one sheet and held it toward him. And every single inspection was signed by the same city inspector, a man named Roy Calhoun, who has processed more violation notices for Foss-managed properties in the past 3 years than for all other property management companies in this city combined. Marcus set his legal pad on the corner of her desk. Is that legal? The inspections? On paper, yes. That's the problem. The violations are fabricated, but the paperwork is clean. Someone knows exactly how to file these things, so they hold up at first glance. She sat down. We need something older than this, something that shows this wasn't opportunistic, that Sycamore Court was a specific target. She found Earl Simmons through a contact at the city housing office. Retired building inspector, 22 years of service, lived on Fenwick Drive, 12 minutes away. He answered the phone on the second ring. His house was the kind of house that had been carefully maintained for 30 years. Small front yard, clean gutters, a welcome mat that had been replaced recently. Earl Simmons was 67 years old, broad-shouldered, with the deliberate movements of a man who had spent decades making precise assessments of physical spaces. He led them through the kitchen without ceremony, and Marcus noticed immediately that the wall along the far side of the garage door was lined floor to ceiling with filing boxes, each one labeled in black marker in a small, exact hand. Earl's wife set 2 mugs of coffee on the table without being asked and left the room without a word. But she paused in the doorway for just a moment, long enough to look at the boxes, then at her husband, with an expression that said she had been waiting for this visit for a long time. Diane said. Earl said. He pulled out a chair and sat down across from them. He reached for the 3rd box from the left and opened it on the table. The smell of old paper rose between them. Diane asked. Earl looked at her. He pulled out a manila folder and set it between them. The label on the tab read, Meridian Property Group, the original name. Inside, the top document was dated March 2019, a city redevelopment contract. Attached, a list of target properties. Sycamore Court was 3rd from the top. Earl spread the documents across the kitchen table one by one, the way a man lays out evidence he has been carrying alone for a very long time. The 2019 redevelopment contract was 41 pages. The city had allocated $4.1 million for what the document called __, quote, _69, __, along a corridor that included Sycamore Court. The contract named Meridian Property Group as the development partner, the same company that had quietly become Foss Property Management 4 years later, without announcement, without public notice, without anything that would connect the new name to the old obligations. Diane said slowly. Earl said. He tapped the page. Marcus had both hands flat on the table. He was looking at the list of target properties, 3rd from the top, his building, his daughter's home, planned 5 years ago. They were never going to let us stay, he said. No, Earl said. They were always going to move you out. The only question was how long it would take and how much resistance they'd meet. He looked at Marcus directly. You're the resistance. Diane was already writing. Earl, I need you to be willing to testify, not just provide documents. Testify, in a hearing, on record, with your name attached. Earl was quiet for a moment. His wife appeared in the doorway again, drying her hands on a dish towel, and looked at him with an expression that was not quite a question. "I kept these boxes for 22 years, he said finally. "I didn't keep them to leave them in my garage." 3 days later, Marcus came home from his night shift at 7:08 a.m. to find a new envelope on the floor inside his door, not slipped under. Someone had opened the building's main entrance and walked up 3 flights of stairs and pushed it through the mail slot directly. The envelope had no stamp, no return address, just his name, typed on the front. He stood in the hallway in his scrubs and opened it. It was a voluntary vacate agreement. 2 pages, his name at the top, a signature line at the bottom, and a number, $6,000, offered as a quote 82 if he signed within 7 days. $6,000 for 19 years of Miss Roberta's life, for Mr. Finch's 11 years of careful receipts, for the Delgado children who had never known another home, for Lily's school 4 blocks away that she walked to every morning with her backpack and her golden retriever patch and her colored pencils lined up in order. He set the envelope on the counter. He looked at it for a long moment, the refrigerator humming beside him, the morning light coming in flat and pale through the 2 short curtains. Then he picked up his phone and called Diane. She answered on the first ring. "I was just about to call you," she said. Her voice had a different quality than usual, tight, careful. "Marcus, they filed a condemnation notice this morning, on your unit specifically. Not the building, just yours." Diane laid it out in plain language, the way she always did, because plain language was the only kind that was actually useful. The condemnation notice had been filed that morning through the city housing office, signed by Roy Calhoun, the same inspector whose name appeared on every FOSS-related violation report in the Discovery records. The notice cited structural instability in Unit 3C. If Marcus did not vacate within 48 hours, the city had the authority to involve child welfare services on the grounds that the apartment was uninhabitable for a minor. "They're using Lily," Marcus said. "Yes," Diane said. "That's exactly what they're doing." He was standing at the kitchen counter, still in his scrubs from the night shift, the voluntary vacate agreement still sitting where he'd left it. The morning light had moved across the floor while they talked, and now it reached the edge of the second-hand couch where Lily's throw blanket was piled in the corner. "Can they actually take her?" His voice was level. His hand on the counter was not. "Not easily, and not if we respond correctly. But Marcus, we have to respond today. This is designed to make you sign that agreement before you have time to think." He looked at the throw blanket. He thought about Lily at school right now, 4 blocks away, lining up her colored pencils before her first class, not knowing any of this existed. "What do we do?" he said. "We don't vacate. We file an emergency motion to contest the condemnation. We attach Earl's documents and the Discovery records, and we show up to whatever hearing they schedule with everything we have." A pause. "They're going to send someone to your door. Probably today. Probably with the inspector." "I know. When they come, don't argue, don't raise your voice, don't give them anything they can use. Ask for credentials, ask for the statutory basis in writing, and call me the second they're standing in your hallway. I'll call you while they're standing there." A brief silence. "Good," she said. He hung up. He stood in the kitchen for a long moment, the refrigerator humming, the apartment around him holding its familiar quiet, the slightly too short curtains, the photograph on the bookshelf, the smell of the coffee he hadn't finished. All of it ordinary, all of it his. He walked down the hall to Lily's room and stood in the doorway. Her bed was made. She always made it before school, had done it since she was 6 without being asked. Her animal notebook was on the pillow. On the cover, in her careful block letters, She had written her name, and beneath it, in smaller letters, "and home." He stood there for a moment, just looking. Then he walked back to the kitchen, picked up his phone, and texted Miss Roberta upstairs. "They filed on my unit. Hearing coming. I need you to be ready to speak to what you've seen." He texted the same thing to the Delgados. Then he called Earl Simmons and left a message. "It's moving. Bring everything." He set the phone on the counter face up and waited. At 7:14 a.m., he heard footsteps in the hallway. 2 sets, stopping outside his door. The knock came. The courtroom smelled like old wood and central air conditioning and the particular stillness of a room where people's lives get decided. Marcus sat at the respondent's table in a clean button-down shirt, his hands folded in front of him, and watched Foss's attorney arrange his papers with the unhurried confidence of someone who had never once lost in this building. Diane sat beside Marcus with Earl's folder open on the table and her pen already moving. The hearing lasted 40 minutes before it started going wrong. Foss's attorney was polished. His name was Whitfield, and he spoke in the measured cadence of someone who had learned that pace itself was persuasion. He presented the condemnation notice. He presented Roy Calhoun's inspection report. He presented a photograph of a ceiling crack that Marcus had never seen in his apartment, taken from an angle that made it impossible to identify the room. The judge, a woman in her late 50s named Judge Carla Metz, reading glasses on a chain around her neck, looked at the photograph for a long time. "Ms. Okafor," she said, "the city's documentation appears to be in order. What is the basis for your emergency contest?" Diane stood. "Your Honor, the basis is that the documentation is fabricated, and we have 22 years of records to demonstrate exactly how." Whitfield smiled slightly. "Your Honor, the respondent's attorney is making a serious accusation against a certified city inspector." "I'm aware of what she's making," Judge Metz said. "Mr. Simmons, you're listed as a witness for the respondent. Please come forward." Earl Simmons walked to the witness stand in a dark gray jacket that smelled faintly of cedar from wherever he'd stored it. He sat down. He set his folder on the railing in front of him with both hands, the way a man sets down something he has been carrying for a very long time, Diane said. Earl opened the folder. The room went very quiet. Whitfield's pen stopped moving. "I also have," Earl continued without raising his voice, 7 years of inspection records showing that Roy Calhoun processed 0 violation notices for Sycamore Court prior to Foss's management contract, and 31 notices in the 24 months after. Judge Metz took her glasses off the chain and put them on. She looked at the documents Earl was placing on the railing one by one. She looked at them for a long time. Then she looked at Whitfield. He was looking at his papers. His jaw was set. He did not look up. Marcus sat completely still at the table, his hands folded exactly as they had been at the start, and waited for the room to finish deciding what it already knew. Judge Metz dismissed the condemnation notice that same afternoon. The State Housing Authority opened a formal investigation into Roy Calhoun's inspection practices within the week. Foss's redevelopment contract was suspended pending audit. The Delgado family's notice was voided. Mr. Finch's lease was renewed. Miss Roberta's door got its sticker removed, and someone from the building, nobody ever said who, filled the space where the adhesive had been with a small painted flower that was still there months later. That evening, Marcus made his wife's recipe, chicken and rice with the spices she had kept in a specific order on the second shelf, the ones he had never rearranged. The apartment filled with a smell that was warm and familiar and ached in the way that good things sometimes ache when they remind you of someone who is gone. Lily sat at the kitchen table with her notebook open, her colored pencils in their row. She looked up when he set the plates down. "Is it over?" she asked. "It's over." She considered this. Are we staying? We're staying. She nodded once, with the gravity of someone receiving information she had already decided to believe. Then she picked up a pencil and went back to her drawing. They ate dinner while the light outside the two short curtains went from gold to gray, and the apartment held them the way it always had, quietly, imperfectly, entirely. 6 weeks later, Marcus ran into Earl Simmons at the public library on Calder Street. Earl was carrying a banker's box, both arms under it, labeled on the side in his small, exact handwriting, Sycamore Court, complete record, for Diane Okafor, ESQ, Marcus said. Earl set the box on the circulation desk with the careful deliberateness of someone completing something that had been waiting a long time to be finished. Underscore, underscore, quote underscore, 117, underscore, underscore. He dusted his hands on his jacket. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 118, underscore, underscore. Marcus looked at the box, at the label, at Earl's handwriting, small and exact and certain. He thought about what it meant to carry something for 22 years, because you believed the day would come when it mattered. He did not say any of this out loud. Thank you, he said instead. Earl shook his hand. Go home, Marcus. He drove home in the Impala, the afternoon light catching the cracked rear bumper, the passenger side window open 3/4 of the way, because it still wouldn't go further, and probably never would. Lily was in the passenger seat with her notebook open on her lap, a colored pencil moving in slow, careful strokes. He glanced over at a red light. She had drawn a dog. Ears up, tail mid-wag, the kind of dog that exists most perfectly in the imagination of an 8-year-old who has wanted one her whole life. Beneath it, in her careful block letters, she had written one word. Home. Marcus looked back at the road. The light turned green. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. If this story stayed with you, please hit the like button and subscribe. There are 2 more stories waiting on this screen right now, and they are